Ready? Play.
Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we updated you on the first week of the US Open, and this week we'll be recapping the last few rounds of the tournament and considering the implications of this tournament's result in the future. So, Erik, this is kind of a similar question for you to last week, but do you have a match or moment that stood out to you in the second week of the Open that you wanted to let us know about?
Yeah, definitely a moment. I would say having the two Americans, Taylor and Francis, in the semis playing against each other was probably the highlight of my US Open because, obviously this haven't hasn't happened in a while. And I feel like it was just kind of a moment where we all got to enjoy, like, okay, maybe American tennis isn't all the way back, but it's getting there. It's on the right track, and this is clear evidence of it. It was a great match too, a back and forth five setter. So I feel like it just kind of embodied like the spirit of Americans battling back. Like these two went to war, and then ultimately Taylor did get better end. Just kind of a comeback nail in the coffin win where he had to come back, and then that last set was more of like a statement, like I'm not here to mess around. And then the big roar after. That was just the highlight.
100%. And having the double Americans in the semis, which we kind of were talking about last week, whether there was going to be an American in the semis. And then we got two, which was nice because it gives kind of a guarantee of that American finalist. But speaking on that, we had a few other things that we talked about last week that we kind of got to see how they played out this week. So obviously, we're talking about how Sinner Paul was going to go. And speaking on that, I feel like Tommy had some great opportunities in that match to get a break and win a set off of Sinner. He had those two tie breaks in the first two sets, but ultimately he lost both. And I think after he lost that second one, he kind of just knew it was over. We also talked about that Sinner Medvedev possibility of them meeting in the quarterfinals, which was interesting because they were the only two Grand Slam champions left in the draw. And unfortunately, that wasn't enough for everybody else. There was still no new champ in the end of this. But that match between Sinner and Medvedev was really a weird one that we'll get into a little bit, but it just didn't really line up like you would expect it to with two guys that are very high up there, top five in the world.
Yeah, I feel like it was headlined as, oh, this is the final of the tournament, right? You have the two best players left.
Yeah.
I feel like it was pitched as that, but it didn't quite live up to it.
Well, I mean, it was the technically the closest match of those last few because it was the only one that Sinner had from the quarterfinals onward that went to more than three sets.
Yeah, yeah, good point. And it shows his dominance, right?
100%. But yeah, no, so we've talked about that. We can kind of just review what happened. Obviously, last week we updated through the first half of the round of 16. So let's just jump right into the second half of that. We already mentioned Sinner Paul, uh, Medvedev clobbered Borges, and similarly, Draper was pretty dominant over Mahach. So those two matches were pretty one sided. And then Deminar also handled Thompson in four sets. So honestly, Monday was a pretty disappointing day just in terms of close matches because all of the guys seem to be pretty dominant against their opponents there.
Yeah, I feel like this goes exactly back to what I was talking about, why I don't like upsets in tournaments, especially big slams, because you get matches like these. Like, was this fun? Was this entertaining to watch?
Well, no, but it also would have been entertaining had there been even more upsets. Like if all of a sudden Borges had come out and beaten Medvedev, that would have been really exciting.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Is the excitement of the upset, does that outweigh the boringness of like the possible next match that you're gonna get where it's very one-sided? Like people love seeing upsets because it's a in the moment type of thing, but then you have to suffer watching, pretty bad matches this late in the tournament.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of is a balance of whether you want to see the excitement now or the excitement later, kind of. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like if you get an early round upset, that makes it really interesting and it adds entertainment value to the earlier rounds, but
Hmm.
it maybe takes away from some of the later rounds. I think kind of what you want is maybe a couple early upsets, but then not too many.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that because it would just be a two, run of the mill tournament if there were no upsets. It's just like very predictable.
Yeah, I mean that was
It's
kind
like
of
a
the
March Madness
the
bracket.
theme of the whole Big Three era, right? Was like
Hmm.
you had the top eight guys like dominating, and it would be like Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, Murray, Wawrinka, Songa, Ferrer, Berdych, all these guys, and we're in
Mhm.
like the quarterfinals of every tournament. So it was cool to see those matchups, but you didn't have as much of these random guys making these runs.
Yeah, yeah. No, that just goes to show, I think tennis is not at the level that it was. I think it's more variable now. I think the
Yeah.
top players are more prone to losing.
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments about like people say, oh, this like certain eras aren't as strong because there's more upsets, and I don't
Mhm.
know necessarily think that that's the case where you can say this era is stronger than this other era all the time, but it does make it seem like the top players are definitely less separated than the they were maybe in other eras.
Yeah, I also think it's a little premature to make arguments about current eras. Like I think this argument could be made next era, like in a I don't know, a decade when looking back, you can compare two historical eras because right now living in the present moment, I feel like it's kind of tough to make that argument.
100%. Yeah, I mean it's hard. Yeah, hard to make a historical
Yeah,
commentary in the
right,
present,
right. All right. So
but
let's leave that there, right?
yeah, exactly. But then moving on to the quarterfinals, we had Dimitrov Tiafo. That seemed to be shaping up to be a very interesting match. I mean, they split the first two sets. They had some really cool points there, and then Dimitrov gets injured and ends up having to retire. But it was really sad because it was so clear that he wanted to play on, but his body just wasn't doing it for him.
Yeah, it was sad, especially because you can kind of tell that he was trying to hold it in together, but it was just, sad seeing him the way it was too. I also thought it was a little weird how vague they kept the injury. Like I was really trying to find out what had happened, looking it up the next day, and there was no clear answer.
Yeah, they just said like leg injury.
Yeah, it could like, I'm wondering though, because if it was something as small as a cramp, he would definitely not be acting the way he did. Like it must have been pretty damn serious. And I wonder what benefit it has to him is to keep it close. Like in the press conference, he wasn't giving any information. Like, why is that? Why couldn't he be pretty clear?
I don't know. Maybe it was more severe than he wanted to reveal.
I think so. I think it may be a sign of weakness. Like if you're that injured, maybe he's planning on coming back sooner and he doesn't want players to find him weak. I don't know.
It's tough to say. Tough to say. But
But
speaking on another match in the quarterfinal, another American, Fritz upsets Zverev. I was actually at this match, and it is my match of the week, so I'll talk about it a little bit more later. But just overall, electric atmosphere. It was incredible to be there, and it was really interesting because there were some crazy moments. And even though he won, Fritz was very close to kind of squandering key chances at some points, but he ended up getting it done and moved on to the semis.
yeah, this was my bet of the week. So nice to actually hit one.
Yeah, and the
But
funny thing about this match too is
uh,
Fritz's comment after how he was like, "Yeah, I know that I I think everybody in the crowd wants to see me and Tiafo," and I think he was right because I think that was
yeah,
the double American matchup was definitely what the crowd was hoping for.
yeah, I think it's that. And then Zverev just is not that popular right now with the tennis community with, what had happened before. I feel like he's kind of got that chip on his shoulder. Like he's going out there and playing for him. Like he's not trying to impress any fans whatsoever. Um,
Yeah. Then moving on, another quarterfinal. We talked about this Medvedev Sinner match where it was just so weird. Like Sinner dominated the first and third set, and then Medvedev kind of beat him up in set two. And then in set four, they kind of settled in a little bit, but it still seemed like Medvedev just couldn't control the points as much as he normally tries to. And whenever he tried to take control of it, it seemed like he was producing a lot of unforced errors. And Sinner kind of just had to hang in rallies until Medvedev made the mistake.
yeah, exactly. And that's really not like Medvedev too. I feel like you're usually seeing his opponent make the mistakes, not him. So I was actually at this match as well, and it just kind of seemed like whenever there would be a rally, Medvedev's chances of winning would go down as the longer it went. There was a certain point where if it went super long though, then Medvedev's chances would kind of increase back again. Like the sweet spot for Sinner, I felt like was kind of like 5 to 10 shots where he
Mm-hmm.
had the advantage, and then anything after that, Medvedev tended to do a bit better. It seemed.
Hmm. Yeah, I just I feel like you said, it doesn't seem like very classic Medvedev to be
Hmm.
struggling in those longer rallies.
Yeah, yeah. But his backhand, he just like it felt like he was going around his forehand to hit his backhand. which is
Yeah,
a good shot, but it's not going to go past center by
but
any
even
means.
then, like he would get into a backhand rally, and then as soon as he tried to take control of it and try to go up the line, it seemed
Hmm.
like he was just missing the ball. And you're like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is happening here? Like, I feel like normally he's able to step into that ball and push it up the line, and today just or that day he just wasn't.
Yeah, I think he was noticing that he was losing the backhand battles with center. Like usually he's able to manhandle his opponents in the backhand rallies, but center's backhand was better that day. So I think he thought he needed to take more of a chance, just win the point.
100%. And then the last quarterfinal I was actually at, Draper versus Deminar, and what really stood out in this match was the serve difference, because honestly, it felt like every single game Draper had the advantage on those super short points. Like normally, the server has the advantage in 1 to 2 point rallies. Like, oh, he can serve and then put it away. But it seemed like Draper just when he was serving, he had an advantage. And even when Deminar was serving, it felt like Draper still had the advantage. So it was kind of a weird situation there. And I was just waiting for Deminar to start kind of taking control of the match, and it just never happened.
Yeah, I think this might have been one of the biggest shocks for me, how bad Deminar lost to Draper. Because I thought he would have easily beaten Draper. Or maybe not easily, but at least, beat him.
Yeah, I think Draper was just on form this tournament. It was just a great performance from him. I don't think there was much really
Mhm.
that Deminar could have done different. I mean, like I think it was not necessarily one thing standing out. I think Deminar just needed to play better overall.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I wonder how much of it is like part of his fitness or health? Like, did you notice that being any issue, or was it just being outplayed?
It seemed like he was just outplayed, to be honest. I didn't really notice any
Yeah,
massive issue with his health or an
gotcha.
injury. But anyway, moving on to the semifinals, we had Fritz beating Tiafo in five. Like you said, amazing match. And honestly, I felt like early on, especially Tiafo's serve was just on, and it seemed like Fritz just was trying to just slowly get more and more into the match because Tiafo was controlling a lot of points and got the first set, and then Fritz kind of battled back a little bit, but one thing that was interesting was it seemed like Fritz just started trying to outlast Tiafo. And one big point that stood out was, I think in the fourth set, there was a point that was very long rally, and Fritz drags Tiafo off the court, and Tiafo kind of just gave up and just walked back onto the court and essentially gave up the point, and Fritz put it away. And I feel like this does happen sometimes with players where they're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get back to it. But usually it's like when there's a smash or something. And this wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily that scenario. And I feel like it just gives Fritz confidence to be like, oh, he's weakening, he's breaking. It's my time to now step it up. And confidence is such a massive aspect of tennis in general. Like the mental state you're in is critical. And I feel like Tiafoe just showed a weakness here.
Yeah, and kudos for Fritz for pouncing on that weakness too, because it could be one of two ways, right? You could essentially do what Fritz did and like get the confidence and then overpower him even more, or you can kind of let your foot off the gas a bit and say, "Oh, I have this guy beat, so I'm just going to kind of coast through the rest of the match."
100%. 100%. Yeah, stepping down on the gas versus coasting.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 But hey, I mean, I feel like, is this part of Tiafoe's character? I mean, I feel like I haven't really seen him do this before. This is just kind of a frustration. Like, all right, it kind of got to his head, and it's probably out of his character to do that.
Yeah.
Because, he's usually the guy that would hustle mostly. Like, he runs down balls, as far
Yeah, I
as I
think he
can
was also
tell.
just tired. I think Fritz was kind of moving him around the court
Yeah.
a lot. But then the last semifinal, Sinner versus Draper. I mean, this is kind of funny. I mean, who would have predicted this semifinal before the tournament? With Draper being in there. I mean, I guess people would have predicted Sinner, but either way,
Yeah.
this was a pretty brutal match. I mean, Draper dealing with a stomach issue, throws up on the court. And on the other side, Sinner falls, lands on his wrist, seems to get it a little bit hurt. But in the end, Sinner was able to close it out in 3 sets, even though it was kind of a brutal and physical match.
Yeah, I think that was probably my favorite game of the whole tournament, where we had Draper throwing up on the court and then that amazing point where um the center eventually, like, he got back to that ball and then slid, fell on his wrist, hurt it, but then got right back up in the point and smashed like a a passing winner against Draper. So it was just it like that game in and of itself had it all. I was like, oh my God, whoa, holy shit.
Yeah.
Just back and forth. And, the whole throwing up thing is pretty nuts to me too.
Yeah. I feel like it's just like the conditions getting to him.
Yeah, but I also feel like you shouldn't be like you should kind of be penalized for doing that, in my opinion. Like
Oh,
it's kind of a gross thing. Like all right, if you're a center and you have to come back on that other side and it's kind of like covered in throw up, I don't
what
know,
does
man.
Draper get a mental advantage by throwing up?
No, I think he gets a physical one by making the court smell like throw up,
Yeah,
or
but
at least like
it
having throw
throws
up
up.
on
It
the
smells like
court.
throw up for him too.
I know. I just like wouldn't mind a point penalty or maybe even like a
Yeah. What are
a
they gonna do though?
warning.
Like point penalty
Well, they're
stuff.
gonna be like Draper, get off
Point
the court and
penalty.
throw up.
Vomit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. This kind of just reminds me of being a child and like being sick and then not making it out of my bed to throw up, like throwing up in my bed. My mom being like, come on, like, you can't get up and go to the bathroom. I
Yeah.
think he's just gotta like get off
But
the
you
court
can't
and
just.
throw up.
I don't think that's just allowed though. Like you can't. It'd be like taking a bathroom break in the middle of
Yeah.
a game. Like you can't just be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I have to shit right now."
Yeah. But either way, you said you've seen him do this before, right?
Yeah, I
Like
mean
it's not the
in
first time.
Australia, right? Didn't he throw up after he beat someone in Australia and then like he immediately went and threw up, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I know this year in Miami when he was playing Jari, he just looked defeated too. Like he was gassed out there. So he's
Yeah.
kind of known for not being
Used
in
to
the
those
best,
British like cold conditions, I
right?
guess. And then when it gets too
Yeah.
hot, he just can't deal with it.
Yeah. But either way, man, great tournament for Draper. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of this guy
100%.
in the future.
And then in the final, we had obviously Fritz and Sinner. So massive hype for Fritz, American finalist, first American finalist in the US Open since 2006. And regrettably, I think the match kind of went as it was expected to. Like Sinner just showed that he was the better player here. And honestly, I feel like the only chance in my mind for Fritz was that Sinner's wrist injury was more severe than we thought it was, or something was bogging Sinner down. It just didn't seem like that was the case today. And Sinner just kind of outclassed him. I mean, even when it did seem like Sinner had a false step and Fritz stepped up and maybe got a break, Sinner was able to just kind of recover and break back or just stay in contact with Fritz so that it never really got out of hand for him. And he ended up closing it out in 3 sets.
I know. I kind of felt, I mean, you felt that the first game of the match when Fritz was broken that early. It's kind of like, oh, well,
Yeah,
glad I
not a
didn't get my
great look.
hopes up. Yeah, just not a great start. I mean, like you said, it was expected, but I felt I was almost lying to myself, like optimistic, but fake optimistic. Like I wasn't disappointed by any means. I would have liked to see at least another set, but I think this was what I expected this match to kind of end up as. But it was just cool being in New York and having the crowd, like crowded bar watching. Surprisingly, a lot of center fans too, which was kind of annoying because you had like the back and forth clapping. It was like, all right, who's gonna clap louder? Who's gonna cheer louder? Um, yeah, just good, bittersweet day for Americans, right? Because it's like the second place. You made it
Yeah.
up there, but you didn't fully win.
Yeah. I mean, just speaking on like the crowd aspect, I feel like that could have played a bigger role. I mean, you saw when Fritz got that break in the third set and like he hit that massive overhead and the crowd went absolutely crazy. And it seemed like that momentum might carry in and him close out that set and then we would have had an extra one. But like I was saying, Center just kind of stayed in control and broke back immediately and then was able to close it out. So is a tough situation. Like you said, there's positives here. And speaking on that, do you think that this is a positive, like in terms of American tennis, like what's next? Do they continue to build or is it like, do you think there's going to be a plateau here? Do you think we'll get to a couple more, maybe finals or something? Or is this just like a one-off?
It's a great question. I think it's definitely not going to be the norm. I think it's going to be pretty rare to see Americans in slams, but I don't think that this is the last time. I think this was probably the best chance Fritz is going to have, unfortunately. But I feel like it's one of those where it happens and now the floodgates open. Like Tommy Paul, Shelton, potentially Tiafo, like these guys are going to see this and they're going to want more because he's made it the furthest so far, right?
Yeah.
Like there's only
Like,
up.
yeah. My question maybe is like, over the next 5 years, do you think there's going to be like more than 3 American finalists?
Finalists, yeah, I would say so. Maybe not winners. I think it's gonna be pretty tough with Sinner and Alcaraz right now. I think this is gonna be crazy, but I think our best shot is Shelton in like 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I could see it being like Shelton or even like someone like Corda, where it's like
Yeah,
on his day, he's so ridiculously good. And if he can just put it together for a few matches, all of a sudden he might just show up and be a real threat.
yeah, and I think it will be a U.S. Open. Like it's probably not gonna be a clay tournament, and then I don't know.
You never
U.S.
know.
Open.
Shelton may show up at Wimbledon and just be hitting these 160-mile-an-hour serves and be like,
That is
I'm just gonna hold serve every time and hope I can win a couple
that's
tie
true.
breaks.
What do you think about Americans?
I still think that they're kind of on the outside. Like this seemed like a very much every single thing going right in this tournament, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you had a lot of situations where, like for example, Djokovic and Alcaraz both go out early, and yet Medvedev still has to play Sinner in the quarterfinal. If Medvedev was on the other half of the draw, would we really have the confidence that he would have lost to Fritz or he would have lost to Tiafo? I'm not super confident that they would have been able to beat him.
Yeah, no, me neither. Me neither. But back to the crowd. So you would think that it would have made more of an impact, and I feel like other people did too. Like that was something Curious mentioned pre-match. He was like he has to use the crowd. He has to use the crowd. But I just don't think Sinner's the type of player that you can use it against. Like he's so mentally tough, it's not going to really hinder him. Like he's not easily spooked, I guess, by the crowd. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I don't. He definitely hasn't shown
Yeah.
being kind of influenced by the crowd, especially in a negative way. So I feel like it's a tough situation. If you're just losing from the get go, it's hard to really gain that momentum and get the crowd fully on your side. Like there were moments where the crowd was going wild, but it wasn't like a consistent sort of beat down.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the crowd and the wrist were like the two glimmers of hope.
Exactly. And then for Sinner, I mean, obviously second Grand Slam of the year. Now we're looking into next year. What do you think for him? Like, do you think it's going to be similar next year with Alcaraz and him kind of splitting them?
I would like to see him kind of healthy and then make that decision because right now he shows he hasn't really been able to sustain a full year, and same with Alcaraz. So I don't really know, to be honest.
Yeah. But anyway, you ready to hop into segments?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty. What's new in tennis? What did you see this week?
Yeah, I'm going to touch more on the economic side of tennis. So I saw this week that this is going to be record prize money for any slam, 3.6 million for the winner and 1.8 for the runner up. That's big money. Wimbledon was about 3.4 in July, and that was the record then. So tallying all Sinner's prize money in 2024, he's about 10.6 million bucks, whereas Alcaraz is just over 8 mil as kind of a comparison. I thought this was pretty interesting because like tracking different players, like you and me were talking about, for example,
Thompson.
Thompson. Yeah, like how is he doing? So it's just like very, very mixed. You have some players raking in over 10 million like Sinner, and then a couple, at the back end of tennis, like barely scraping by. I'm not going to pose it, but this does bring up that age old question, like men and women making the same amount of money in the slams, even though women like the workload is less. But we don't need to get there. That's just food for thought.
Yeah. I think it was really interesting though with Thompson. Like he
Hmm.
got that 750 grand, I think, for the doubles title, right? And then
Yeah, but he
it's
split that. He
over
has to split
over
it.
oh, it's split between the two of them.
Yeah, it's split between two.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess
Mhm.
that makes sense because it's like you look at like we got to watch his round of 16 doubles match
Yeah,
from like courtside at grandstand
yeah,
because it's just doubles just it doesn't have that draw that singles does. And
yeah.
so
Against Borges too. Two
yeah,
guys who are still in the singles draw.
yeah. And I mean, so he still raked in what like 600 grand for this tournament. So
Yeah.
pretty crazy for him.
Yeah, I feel like with the amount of upsets and low-key players that kind of squeaked by, you do have a lot of players in this tournament making the most money they've ever made in any tournament.
Yeah, like Mahat or someone.
Yeah, exactly. What about you? What did you
Um,
see?
I mean, speaking on that split between Alcaraz and Sinner, this was actually a very unique year because based on my review of the all-time Grand Slam champions, I believe this is the first time ever where we've had this type of split in terms of who won which Grand Slam, where we had one player, Sinner, who won both of the hard court slams to bookend the year, and then in the middle we had Alcaraz winning the Channel Slam on clay and grass. So just an interesting split there. And it kind of seems to point to maybe a little bit of a difference in styles between these two guys, where Sinner, where when he knows the surface super well, he knows the hard court and it fits his game really well. It's really difficult, almost impossible to beat him. And then Alcaraz maybe has a little bit more of like a dynamic style where he can adjust to playing on clay, he can adjust to playing on grass, and as the conditions change, he's able to change with it. And just made an interesting dynamic there between the two guys where they have a slightly different style, and it showed in who won what tournament.
Yeah, that's a great point. We used to think of Medvedev as the hard court specialist. Now I think it's pretty clear it's Sinner.
Yeah. I mean, even then, I feel like it's maybe Medvedev is a hard court specialist, but he's still
He's not
not as good as Sinner.
Yeah, he's not the hard court
Yeah,
specialist. He is
100%.
a hard court specialist.
Yeah. Would do bet of the week now, but obviously just finished the US Open. Don't really want to throw out a bet on like a random challenger or something somewhere. So gonna skip that this week, and let's just head right into match of the week. Could you go for here?
Yeah, I went with Sinner Medvedev quarterfinal just because I was there. Got to see it live. It was my first time seeing Medvedev in person. I had seen Sinner before, actually last year against Wawrinka. So I love being able to cross out players off my list. So finally got to cross Medvedev off. Um, Even though the scoreline didn't feel like it was close, the rallies were all very long and felt super tense. Like it was great having these, 10 plus shot rallies and the crowd being absolutely silent. So quiet you can hear a pin drop in Arthur Ashe and then like little gasps when it would clip the tape or like land just out. Like it was the epitome of being on the edge of your seat watching them rally. So I just had a great time watching that one.
100%. I mean, it was definitely an interesting match to be at, I feel like, because of how weird and back and forth it was.
Yeah, and very weird because the crowd felt like it was on Medvedev's side, which he normally does not get, especially at the US Open.
Yeah. Maybe people just wanted to see some sort of upset.
Yeah, I think they just wanted to see more tennis.
That makes sense too.
How about you?
I'm going with another match that I was at, actually, was Fritz Zverev, just because it was like, I feel like that crowd atmosphere just defined what you kind of expect from the US Open. Like the people were just going crazy every time Fritz won a point. And I feel like it's just what separates live tennis overall is like that atmosphere. Like you get better camera angles and better views from being at home watching on TV, but you just can't match the feeling of being there at that match. And it was just exciting to see Fritz get through.
Yeah, that must have been a good one. I think out of all the matches, I would have liked to be at this one the most.
Yeah, it was
So was that your first
awesome
time seeing either player or?
It was my first time, I think, seeing Fritz. Yeah, I think it was my first time seeing both of them.
Nice. Yeah, two solid players to get to cross off.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.